Like Saudi Arabia and Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates has long been in contact with the Israeli regime, interacting in various areas such as trade and cybersecurity. The simple fact begs the question of why the two sides have recently decided to formalize, or as they like to put it, normalize, their relations with much fanfare.
الحادث اللي حدث مؤلم جدا لجميع السعوديين.
The normalization scenario was unfounded just in the run-up to the presidential elections in the United States of America, dragging a line of failures, including the so-called deal of the century behind. Donald Trump was dying for a tremendous foreign policy achievement to brag about in his election campaign.
First of all, this was a great publicity for U.S. President Donald Trump. The U.S. is facing numerous challenges at this time. It has been harshly affected by the COVID pandemic. Trump has been criticized for the harsh reaction against police violence against Black Lives Matter protesters and the violent response. So at that moment, the U.S. presented this normalization as a historic peace deal, which was a good PR, but most of all it benefits Israel and Israel's propaganda.
By the same token, a shambolic peace pact with an apparently Arab enemy could at least temporarily ease pressure on the embattled Prime Minister of Israel.
מטוסים ישראלים ומטוסים של כל המדינות יוכלו לטוס ישירות מישראל לאבו דאבי, לדובאי ובחזרה. אלה פירות השלום של שלום אמת. אני רוצה להודות לג'ארד קושנר ולשייך מוחמד בן זאיד על התרומה החשובה הזאת של היום. יהיו עוד הרבה בשורות.
But it is naive to downplay the whole story to a mere political move. According to a recent report by Foreign Policy, with former relations with the Emiratis, Tel Aviv is now about to play a much bigger role in the region's energy trade and petroleum politics. In the words of Isaac Levy, the CEO of Israeli Europe Asia Pipeline Company, EAPC, opportunities for Arab-Israeli energy deals are broad and lucrative, ranging from investment in the Israeli pipeline itself to adapting it for carrying natural gas or connecting it to the pipelines across Saudi Arabia and the wider Middle East. Due to the boycott imposed by Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and their oil-producing neighbors, tankers, if found docking in Israel, would be barred from future loadings in the Persian Gulf. Hence, they'd have to undergo a complex procedure, like turning off their transponders, repainting, reflagging, re-registering, and faking their docking records. This would so incur extra expenses, which in return would make the Israeli pipelines less attractive. After the Israeli-UAE deal is formalized, Tel Aviv hopes that other members of the Persian Gulf Cooperation Council will follow. In this case, Israeli energy companies hope to flourish in the absence of the boycotts.
Regarding Israel, this was as well a foreign policy gain for the Netanyahu regime, which, Netanyahu has been addicted for corruption. There have been mass demonstrations against him with Israeli protesters demanding his resignation. And although the UAE somehow tried to make it seem as if it successfully negotiated with Israel to stop the annexation of the West Bank, Netanyahu still reaffirmed on the same day as the deal was announced that the annexation would eventually take place anyway.
Moreover, the UAE and the Israeli regime can now overtly cooperate against Turkey in the eastern Mediterranean region, where rivalry tensions are high over the huge oil and gas reserves.
Of course, with the UAE's involvement in the eastern Mediterranean, this is also a way of trying to limit Turkey's presence, especially in the eastern Mediterranean and northern Africa.
The unity between the two sides is also traceable in Libya, where both Abu Dhabi and Tel Aviv have thrown their weight behind General Khalifa Haftar against the UN-recognized Government of National Accord, GNA. In other words, the deal might not have much impact on resolving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but it will prolong war in Libya. In yet another respect, the UAE and Israel have long been on the same side. The Emirati looting of Yemen's archaeological treasure resembles that of the Israeli destruction of Palestinian identity in the occupied territories. Since the onset of the war, the UAE has allegedly stolen over 1 million Yemeni archaeological artifacts from Yemen, not just to swell its coffers, but to strip the nation of its identity. It seems that Abu Dhabi is just following the Israeli regime in this regard. The Israeli Zionist campaign to destroy Palestinian heritage sites and erase cultural contributions of the Palestinian people has been at play as a long-term strategy over the past 7 decades. The Israeli army has used its military assaults on cultural monuments and places of worship of historical significance. According to official Palestinian reports, Tel Aviv destroyed 73 mosques in the 51-day war on the Gaza Strip in 2014. Some of these mosques, like Al-Omari Mosque in Jabaliyah, are ancient structures dating back to more than 1,000 years. Last but not least, the United Arab Emirates has never been at war with the Israeli regime. In the Arab wars with Israel in 1948, 1956, and 1967, the United Arab Emirates was non-existent, and in the 1973 war, Abu Dhabi had no army to fight the regime. As for the Israeli invasion of Lebanon in 1982 and later in 2006, there are no credible documents showing the Emiratis helped Beirut.
The normalization is merely a enthusiastic marketing of the current status quo between the UAE and Israel through this celebration of the normalization. The Trump administration is now able to verbalize reality as an achievement and sell it as a historic breakthrough. It might be a normalization insofar as this step allows the UAE and Israel to make their relations public, first of all, and to further their cooperation in different fields in the economy and so-called security. But these two regimes were never at war. On the contrary, Israel and the UAE are natural allies to some extent as U.S. proxies.
As the leftover of the British colonialism in the region, the United Arab Emirates and the Israeli regime have always been on good terms, whether formal or informal, whether covert or overt.
الحادث حدث مؤلم جدا لجميع السعوديين.